a brief slide. Great, thanks. Right, so I've got over a decade's worth of experience as a business analyst and product owner. I've worked across a number of industries, automotive, financial services, banking, and insurance industries have pretty much been the main bread and butter of my career. I've also predominantly been engaged as an independent consultant, which is sometimes called contractor. Most of my working life has been as an independent consultant, so that has given me a good breadth of experience across not only different industries but also different businesses, different applications, different types of deliveries, and also different type of products as well. I've also been fortunate enough to lead large, high-performing teams as well to deliver, to build and design flagship digital products. So you mean some of which you probably have used in one way or the other. I've also worked in cybersecurity. I've worked on CRM products. I've worked on B2B and B2C SaaS products as well, same as mobile web applications and big data, as well as infrastructure-related products. So I've got a good broad range of experience across a number of products. Which means that it enables me to speak to a lot of things, particularly in the digital product space and software delivery lifecycle as well. I'm also a certified product owner and manager. I'm also a trainer and educator as well, and I run my own training company, and I'm currently a senior product manager. So hopefully that has given you good understanding of what I bring to the table. And before we go in, just a little bit of housekeeping. So today's session, I would expect today's session to be interactive. However, if in the course of the presentation today you've got questions, please raise your hand, and Ibukun will do the needful to get you to speak. I do prefer an interactive session rather than just me talking at you, because that way it enables me to get feedback and also enables me to make sure that everyone is engaged, because if you're not engaged, you tend to tune off. So there will be a question and answer session at the end, but if you do have questions during the presentation, you don't have to wait until the end. You can either drop it in the chat. If you feel you can't talk, drop it in the chat, and Ibukun will let me know. And also at the end of this, if you stay right to the very end, I've got 2 surprise gifts for everyone who's on the call today. So please try and stay to the end, and I'll present those gifts to you as well. So it's for everyone who stays on to the end. Okay, so now we go into the business of today. So we're already going to look at what is user story mapping? Why is user story required? Why do we even bother with it? What are the building blocks of a user story map? How do you go about creating a user story map? What steps do you take? We'll also be looking at a practical worked example, because I am more of a showing rather than telling kind of person. So I would talk about the theory of it. I will talk about all of the things that you need to understand from a theoretical point of view, but I'll also be showing you a practical worked example. And as I teach today, I'd also be giving you real life scenarios of where I've used these user story maps and what specific outcomes we've been able to achieve using user story mapping. And that will hopefully bring it to life for you. Then there will be the Q&A. And then I also have, I'm hoping, as part of giving back to the Ladder Down community, I'm hoping to have more visual sessions. So I believe that visuals as a business analyst and a product owner is one of the most strategic tool you can have in your toolkit. So there'll be other visuals or diagrams that I would also be teaching about in future presentations. Obviously, that's subject to agreeing with Ibukun when will be the optimal time for that. And then I also have additional resources that I will be presenting at the end of this training today that would help you not only in what I've taught today, but beyond this as well. Okay, So going into our first item, what is user story mapping? A lot have been said about user story mapping. You probably have heard about it. You probably have read up on it on Google, but what exactly it is it? Now, user story mapping is a way of visually plotting out the user journey and the underlying activities or features that supports that user journey in its very simple terms. And it is a great way that we use to bring everyone onto the same table or onto the same understanding. Now, as BAs or product owners, your key tool or your key skill set is the ability to communicate and the ability to act as a bridge between a diverse group of stakeholders. So when you work as a BA or product owner, you'd always have multiple groups of stakeholders that you deal with, from engineering to marketing to security to IT to customer services, all sorts of stakeholders. And you act as the bridge or the glue that holds everything together and make sure that we're able to go from an idea to actual user outcomes. Now, the way you go about doing that is using the user story map to bring all of these groups together and creating a joint understanding of what that user journey looks like. Now, a common question would be, so I know user story mapping and user story already. How is it different from user story mapping? Now, user story itself is a single isolated viewpoint of a particular instance or action of the user. It is isolated, it is siloed, and it doesn't give you the big picture. It's perfect for what it is designed for. What it is designed for is to enable you see exactly what the user is trying to do in that particular instance that the user story is explaining or describing. Whereas the user story map itself threads everything together and creates an end-to-end view of one, what the user is trying to achieve, and two, what steps the user takes to get there, and how we as a business help the user to achieve their own goals. Every business is set up for providing value to a user. One common thing I hear a lot of people say, or one resistance I commonly hear is, oh, Louis, user story map would not work for a technical delivery. And the question I always ask them, the response I always give them is, are you creating this technical delivery for your own consumption or for your own use? If no, you're creating it for an end user. Whatever thing we're doing as a business is to provide value to an end user. And that end user is the person we need to be building for. And once we understand how that user consumes or extracts value from that technical thing we think we're building, we'll be better able to serve that user and also prioritize our work much better. So let's go through some of the things that provide added value for you as a business analyst. The first thing is it creates an improved understanding of the user journey. Now, I was very glad when people were making the introductions at the start, and I had various titles like product designer, PMO person, business analyst, product owner. So there are all sorts of people on this call that would understand what a user journey is. Now, the user journey just shows what exactly the user is doing. It doesn't show how we as a business, when I mean we, you're working for an organization as a BA, how do you as a business provide or supporting features that enables or unlocks that user journey and provides the key outcomes the user is seeking to derive? Now, that improved understanding is what the user story map gives us. It doesn't just give us the user journey in isolation, but it also gives us all the activities. It also gives us all the features. It also gives us all the services that underpins that user journey, and how we as a business, as a technical team, as a marketing department, as a customer services agent, as a legal person in the business, as a compliance person, as a security person, how we fit into that user journey and how we provide value to that user. And that enables us to build the right features, enables us to prioritize, and enables us to do everything else we need to do. Secondly, it provides the end-to-end visualization of the end journey and the supporting features. We talked about that already. It also enables efficient prioritization and planning of work. Without knowing what the highest value item is to the user, we are very likely to build the things that are not immediately or of the right priority to the user. And so having the user story map enables that prioritization. Now, if you worked as a product owner or a product manager, you will understand that or appreciate that there is the constant need for you to prioritize what your team is going to build next, because you're dealing with multiple demands from multiple sides of the business on a daily basis. Everybody is screaming, my feature, my function, my change is more important than everybody else, and they want it done yesterday, of course. How do you then enable your prioritization that it is logical, sensible, and of the most value? Because remember, you must show your return on investment for every feature that you release. Why are we doing this? Why is it important? Of what benefit is it? How do we justify the spend we're going to make on creating this feature to the board, to the business, to the CEO, to our C-suite? So all of those questions you need to be able to answer as a product owner. The user story map helps you to answer those questions by showing you what is higher priority and what needs to be done first and second and last. And if you have that in place, it's easier for you to have difficult conversations, because as a product owner, you would always be having those difficult conversations with stakeholders, explaining one, why you can't do that feature now, two, why you're sorry, not only will you not be doing it now, you won't be doing it this year, or why you think an alternative solution would be better off for the problem the thing they're trying to solve. So user story mapping helps you to do that. It also improves communication with stakeholders. Now, when you work as a business analyst and a product owner, you would have a diverse group of stakeholders with a diverse expectation. So, for example, the guy from the security team has a specific expectation from the product. He wants it to be secure. He wants it to be compliant. He wants it not to introduce any vulnerabilities, and so on and so forth. And then you have the person from the marketing team, and the marketing team person is saying, I don't want this product to be on brand. I want it to have to maintain our tone of voice. I want it to express what we are as a business. And I also want it to be what my market actually wants. I want us to be competitive. Different set of conversation you're having with them. When you're talking to the man from the engineering team, the man from the engineering team is saying, are we going to build this on JavaScript? Is this going to be hosted on AWS or Azure? Would this require APIs? Does this already have established APIs? Or is there a library for this? All those technical things is what he's looking at. He's not interested in the user. He's not interested in the marketed person, which is rightly so, because that's not his core function. So you are now the hub in the center of this circle, bringing in those spokes and trying to make sure that everybody is joined up or connected and having their requirements heard, listened to, and also documented. And so how do you maintain this communication with all this diverse group of people speaking different languages without having to recreate yourself for each person? And how do you also do it in a way or in a language that is understandable by this broad set of stakeholders? You don't want to be talking technical language, for example, with the marketing person. Likewise, you don't want to be talking about tone of voice with the engineering person. So user story enables you to maintain that communication. Another way it helps you to do that is when you're working with different teams. So you could be having a single delivery, but you have 3-4 teams doing little bits and bobs of that single delivery. How are you able to maintain a consistent thread of communication across these diverse teams that are delivering different features for the same product? The user story map helps you to do that. If you also have a single team, and that single team understands that they're doing a slice of a bigger pie, how do you help them to understand how their little slice fits into the bigger picture without overwhelming them with too much information? The user story map helps you to do that. Now, in the old days, we used to have something called a requirements traceability document. Now, that used to be a massive Excel or Word document that would list all your requirements to the nth degree, and you'll be ticking them off as you go along. And it used to be the most hated exercise for most BAs. Now, in today's world, in the agile world, the user story map helps you to ensure traceability of your requirements from collection to post-delivery. You're able to show how your requirements have moved from the initial time you gathered them to when you documented them and to when you then handed over to engineering, and engineering delivered it, and now it's in the hands of the user. The user story map helps you to maintain that end-to-end traceability of your requirements. Additionally, one thing you would always find of being at risk for as a BA is that you would find that people expect you to have all of the requirements. What you have not documented would not be built. What you have not captured would not likely be built, and it will be termed as a missed requirement. So you're always at risk of that, of being blamed for not having provided either the right requirement or the right level of detail for the requirement that is required. So what the user story map does for you is that it helps you to create that overview, broad overview, as well as the detailed overview. So you can identify where gaps are and you can fill it. So you're less likely to have missed requirements as a BA when you use your user story map to capture and track and trace your requirements. Also, it's a reusable living artifact. What do I mean by this? In a lot of organizations, you would typically go in and no one really has an end-to-end understanding of how the customer goes from point A to point D. It would most likely be in people's heads. People understand siloed bits of it that they know and they work on a day-to-day basis. And so the user story map creates a reusable living artifact. So when we create it for a specific project, it captures a point in time. We can continue to enhance and edit it and refine it as we go into the future, making changes. It doesn't have to be done once and never looked at again. But because we've captured it once and we've been able to get the right input from the right stakeholders, it is something we can rely on upon in future, even when we want to make other changes beyond the changes that we've made today that required us creating it in the first place. So it's something that is very useful, not only to delivery teams or engineering teams, but also useful to marketing teams, sales teams, business sides, and customer services teams. They use it as well. And it creates a focus on the user. Earlier I mentioned that sometimes people will say, oh, it's a technical delivery. We don't need to bother with the user. But when you have a user story map, it forces the focus upon the user. And when the focus is upon the user, it's easier for us to get the best outcomes, the best solutions, and also the best returns on investment for us as a business. And so having that user story map enables you to create that function that brings everybody to put the right focus on the user. From whatever parts of the business they're coming from, the focus will be upon the user. If you do have any questions as I go on, please raise your hand if you want to say something, and Ibuku can unmute you, or you can put your questions in the chat.
Thank you for that's pretty good going. And we do have one raised hand, and we also have a question in the chat. Would you like to take the question in the chat first?
Yes, please,
Joanna has asked, can a feature team use a story mapping, especially of the team, or especially if, I think she meant to say, if the team is working only on a single feature? Can you use a story mapping if you're working on a single feature? And then I'll unmute Timothy in the meantime.
Absolutely. So that question is indeed correct. Yes, a single team working on a single slice, the user story map does it beautifully. So I'll give you guys an example. So I had a delivery. We had four different teams delivering different parts of the same product. Two of those teams were not fully committed to the delivery. That is, they were acting as a supplementary team. And one of those four teams was also a third-party team. So added complication of having a third-party team that was, in effect, not fully controlled by you as the product owner. So now, those four teams were delivering different slices of one big pie. And we had a huge user story mapping session where on Miro, where we went through every single feature and everybody contributed, providing detail of the bits that they wanted to work on or the things that they were required to commit to. Now, in that session, we were able to achieve two key things. One, we were able to bring everybody on the same page. So even though you were doing one part of that big pie, you now knew how your pie fitted into the other teams and what the interdependencies were. So we were able to map, when do I need to get this API contract ready so that the other team is able to consume it? Does it need to be done? Do I need to create this page, or can I use dummy data and then the other team can test later on? So we were able to do prioritization. We were able to get everybody to understand how the user was going to get value. We were able to identify what was our MVP and what was going to be our phase 2, phase 3. We were able to understand what was the must-have, what should have and could have. We were also able to make sure that every single person, every single stakeholder had visibility of what was needed to be done. And also, if your feature was not prioritized for MVP, you had a good understanding of why it wasn't. And so it was easy to have those difficult conversations because everyone was, it was transparent exercise. They were all there, everyone was seeing it. And we're all having that conversations. Now, it was an expected, in terms of hours, it was an expensive exercise because we had over 60 people on a full day workshop doing this. But it also enabled us to rebase our promises and commitments to the board. Because at that point now, we could say, based on what we've done now, we don't think that date we had that had earlier been committed to was achievable, not unless we did this. So we provided options. If we're going to still hold to that date, then we're going to drop this. And we were able to understand what the detriment would be to the user from a legal, compliance, security, whatever considerations we needed to take into consideration in dropping those features for MVP. So yes, as we go on, when we do the worked example, you would see how a single team would be able to see their slice of the big pie, and then they'll be able to work around that. Hopefully I've answered that question. Someone else was going, Timothy, you were going to ask a question? Oh, okay. All right then. All right, looks like he's not answering. So let's move on. Next, so the next question then is, so we've covered exactly what the benefits are for using a user story map, how it helps us to achieve our goals, what the benefits are to us as a business, as a team, as an individual, as a delivery team, however, whatever lenses we want to put on, we'll be able to see value out of it. The user story mapping building blocks. So what are those building blocks? What are those things that we must have in place for us to be able to do a user story map? What are the must-haves? What are those non-negotiables that must be in place for us to have a user story map? First thing we need to do, we need to understand the user journey. Now, I understand that we have a diverse group of people on the course and people perhaps don't fully understand what a user journey is, but let me explain. And for those who already understand it, forgive me, I'm just trying to make sure we carry everybody along. The user journey is really the path through which a user uses a product. So pretty much all of us have joined today via Zoom. When we used this product, this Zoom product, we had specific steps or activities that we carried out. Perhaps we clicked on a link, a Zoom link that was shared with us, or perhaps we just went into the Zoom app and we typed in the meeting ID and we typed in the password, and that took us to the meeting. And then we were told, host will let you in, and then eventually the host let us in, and now we're here. So there were specific steps that we took to achieve the value. The value that you wanted to achieve from joining that Zoom is not that you wanted to go onto Zoom, you wanted to be able to connect with this meeting and learn user story mapping. So that is why we need to understand what is the need of the customer, right? Nobody wakes up and say, oh, I don't feel like doing anything else today. I just want to log into Zoom. There is a need that you're trying to fulfill at the end of that Zoom that is the actual value that the Zoom is providing for you. And that is the goal of the user. So we always understand that when we talk about user journey, we're talking about how that user uses our product to get the value or the end goal they're seeking to achieve. And the steps in between is what we talk about, activity and steps. So those steps are things that we would do. So I've already talked about the example of Zoom, how you logged onto Zoom today. That would be one good example of talking about the activities that you have taken today to be able to access this meeting. And then at the bottom of that, we have user stories that capture So once we've been able to capture the user journey at the top, next we'll capture the activities and steps, and then next we'll have the user stories. The user stories itself carry the detail of what exactly we are going to do to be able to fulfill or help the user capture or achieve their end goal. So those are the three main blocks that you need to have in a user story map. So the question then would be, okay, Louis, that's all well and grand. How do I then go about getting the user's journey? How do I go about getting the activities? I don't know. I've just been employed. This is my second week, and I've been asked to prepare a user story map, and I don't know where the user journey is, or what the activities are, or what the user stories are, which is a fair question, which is why we're here. So first of all, how do you tame the dragon? You know, you got this big dragon of user story mapping that you want to tame, you want to arrest it, you want to take it under control. First of all, you identify and understand your user persona. What do I mean? On this Zoom call, I'm using Zoom because that is something all of us here for sure have used, because for you to have been on this call, you must have used Zoom today. So on this call would have different types of personas. There'll be one persona that joined through the link. They just went, clicked on the link, and off they went. There'll be another persona that typed in their information using the browser. And there will also be another persona who is our host. So her journey will be different. So the person who logged in via the link, their journey is different. The person who logged in, you typing in the meeting ID and the password manually, their journey is different. The person who logged in as a host is different. The capabilities and the functionalities that will be available to Ibukun is different from you who joined just as a guest. When we started the call, you saw Ibukun she had the ability to be able to mute everyone. She had the ability to be able to make me co-host. She had the ability to be able to let people in. Those functionalities or features are things that Zoom had to build to support Ibukun as a host persona's journey. And so the features and functionalities for you as a guest would also be different. And so we need to understand what your user personality type is, and ultimately what goals you're seeking to achieve. So if you look at Ibukun now, her goals, sorry, Ibukun, I'm using you as an example here, but I just feel it will just bring it to life for everyone, and everyone will be able to understand. She wants to know she's letting in the right people. She wants to create a meeting invite to send to people. She wants to be able to control the meeting, you know, who can talk, who cannot talk, and all of those things. Those are her goals. You as the guest, you don't have such goals. Your goals is, am I able to log into the meeting? Am I able to hear the guest? Am I able to see what the guest is sharing on the video? Those are your goals. And so they're different from hers. And so we need to be able to build functions, functionalities, and features that enables you for your particular persona type to achieve your own specific goals and outcomes. And that then defines the backbone. So when we say backbone, you see that in the example we're going to go through. That backbone is simply that thread that the user follows from the start to the finish of them going through that product. So that defines the backbone. Once we've defined that, we can then break those activities into task, or those goals into tasks or activities. And then next level down, we will then create the user stories for each task. Why are we creating those user stories? We're saying, hey, persona, we understand what you're trying to achieve. We understand the steps you're taking to achieve it. And we are now going to write user stories that would enable us as a business build, change, define, amend the functions and functionalities that would enable you unlock that goal. For example, our host today wants to be able to create. So the first thing she does, first activity she does is create the meeting invite. Because without creating that meeting invite in the first instance, there'll be nothing to share and there'll be nothing for you and I as guests to be able to click on. So she create that meeting invite. So which means we now have a feature, activity called create meeting invite. And then we now put underneath them that user stories that define what we need to build to enable or to unlock that function for our host. Is that making sense? If it's making sense, put a thumbs up in the chat. And if it's not making sense, also shout. Oh, someone's raised their hands. Olu. Olu, did you want to ask a question? And Tony as well. Okay, maybe it's an error. I'm just guessing it's an error. You wanted to do a thumbs up and you raised your hands. Okay, cool. Understood. Right. So we then take in the next step is we'll now take input from the stakeholders. Now, remember that earlier example I talked about where I had 4 teams building different parts of the same pie. They were one side of the stakeholders. They were the engineering side. In that workshop, we also had people from marketing. We had people from UI UX. We had people from security. We had people from architecture. We had people from customer services. All of them were stakeholders providing input into that user story mapping session and the features and functionalities we were looking to build. Because all of these stakeholders, in one way or the other, are either consuming the features or they're impacted by the features. So for example, if we create a bad product that drives up the calls for the customer services, even though our users are getting value out of it, we have now created a negative outcome where we have now increased the net number of customer services agents required to handle calls by 50%, for example, just for example. And so we need the input from those from our colleagues from the customer services side to say, hey, this feature is all well and good, but if you do build it like this, this is the outcome. Why not do it like this? And so you need that broad input from stakeholders. Although the first draft will be created by you, the BA, but it is not done in isolation by you. The first draft is okay for you to create, but you now need input from all the stakeholders, both direct and indirect, to come and help you make sure that we have captured all the right requirements to the right level of detail that would enable us make the best choices, both prioritization-wise and planning-wise. And then lastly, we prioritize those user stories and epics based on business value, user needs, and I put their underlying technical dependencies. The reason why I put technical dependencies because if you go to any classic standard user story mapping, video. And that's the difference between speaking with someone who's a practitioner, but from someone who's just a teacher. They will tell you, oh, you prioritize based on business value and user needs. But having been in the thick of it, and with the scars to prove it, I can tell you for free that if you prioritize based on business value and user needs alone, you're likely to fall short, because you always have technical dependencies to factor in. And so if you do one without the other, then you will likely be either unable to achieve your key outcomes, or it would not be an optimal release that you're sending out. So your technical dependencies help you prioritize as well. So as a product owner, as a product manager, I don't only think the business value or the user needs or the key ROI we're looking to return as my driving prioritization metric. I also take technical dependencies, which means I need the input from my engineering and IT colleagues to help me understand the technical intricacies of that big, bold, and ambitious plan I'm seeking to achieve in 2 months, right? So those are the key things that you need to understand for you to be able to create one. Those are the steps. So those specific steps are the steps that you will take as a BA, as a product owner, to be able to create an effective user story map.
Sorry, before you continue, someone's asked the question, is the backbone the same as an epic?
In some instances, yes. So that person has been spying my notes. So yes, when we go through the worked example, you would see it in real life, in real time. So you would see everything I've talked about. I'll bring it to life in a worked example that hopefully would just clarify everything. But yes, in some instances, the epics can serve as the backbone thread. It can be called that, but we'll look at the works example and I'll answer your question specifically in the very next slide. Okay, great. Right, so bringing it to life. Any questions before we go into the practical? All right, so I'm going to switch slides now, and I'm going to show you a worked example. Okay, there we go. Let's present that. Hopefully you can still see my screen. Great, okay, lovely. Right, so Esther, you raised your hand. I'm hoping you're just saying that you can see my screen. That's why you raised your hand. Is that the case? Esther, Timmy, Joanna, do you have questions, or you're saying you can see my screen? Okay, great. All right, so let's crack on. Now, I've done a worked example, and I'll tell you, and I've chosen a banking example for the, sorry?
Oh, sorry, someone's asked if you could kindly expand that or increase that because it's a bit blurry. So if you could kindly expand that diagram by any chance. Thank you.
Right, let's see, blurry. Not sure, let's see if we can. Is that?
Yeah, I think that's a bit larger. Thank you.
That's a bit larger.
Well,
Okay.
in my view, definitely.
Okay. Okay, so we've lost some. Let's try and bring this to the middle. Okay, that's a problem with this frame. It does act up. Okay. There we go. Okay. All right. So I've chosen for this example a banking app. The reason why I've chosen the banking app is because it's very likely that 90 to 95% of the people on this call must have gone through a banking app in one way or the other. So when this is an example of a user story map, and I'll walk you through what I've done. So when you want to create yours, you can then create it. The very first thing you need to start on before you create anything is your user persona type. Your user persona type. So what type of persona am I creating this user story map for? Because that will drive every other thing that you build. So for this example, we have a loan application for a new bank customer. Note, it's a loan application. So it's not they're not opening an account. It's not a mortgage application. It's not, so by me stating a loan application, that's why your title needs to be very clear. You need to spend some time crafting out your title, because your title sets the expectation one, and by setting the expectation defines the scope of your user story map. And because it defines the scope and it has already set the expectation, you are now able to very clearly articulate what it won't have. So because I have said loan application here, you're not expecting to see in this place the application for a new account, a savings account application. You're not expecting to see a mortgage application information here. You're only going to see things that relate to loan application. And next, it says for a new bank customer. Now, I'm stressing on the title because I've trained a lot of people. And what I find is people who don't adhere to this specific guidance I'm giving, they tend to fall short. Because when you set your title right, everything else what falls into place. If you haven't set your title right and defined your scope correctly, then ultimately you're going to find yourself having a poor outcome in terms of what you share eventually. So it says a loan application for a new bank customer. Great. So we've also set some boundaries again. We said a new bank customer, which means you wouldn't expect an existing customer to go through this journey. You wouldn't expect a customer that was already known to the bank, maybe already had a different kind of account, maybe a savings account, maybe a credit card, whatever, with the bank already. So we've already set those aspirations. So the scope is clear. So once you read that title as a stakeholder, you're coming into this user story workshop map. You already have the expectation. You're not going to be asking me, Louis, why did you not include the journey for a mortgage customer? Because the title has already set clear scope boundaries. So once we've done that, next thing we now need to do is to identify the key activities that the user in this instance will be going through. And that's what I've put as activities on the left here. Everything you see in green is the activities of the user. Now, when we write the activities of the user, we're writing the activities not from what they are specifically doing, but we're writing it from the point of view of what goals they're seeking to achieve. So for example, first one says, I want to make a loan application. Next one says, I want a decision on my loan application. And then the last one says, I want more information about my loan account. Now, if you look at it, it is the journey starts from the left and ends on the right. So within those three buckets, we have captured the essence, the core essence of what this new customer is seeking to achieve when they're going through this loan application journey. First of all, they want the ability to make the application, because if they can't make the application, how can they get a decision? Next, they want to know, yeah, I've made the application now, what next? Give me a decision, yeah or nay. Yeah. Then after that, they also want some follow-up conversations or follow-up support services after that. It could be that you accepted the loan and they now want to know what their repayments will look like. It could be that you declined the loan and they want to know why you declined it. You could be that now they've gotten the loan, they want to be able to see their transaction history. There are a number of things that they would want to, know, really. Next, once you've finished defining those top features or activities, we then go, so when we talk about backbone, this is the backbone. Yeah. The user tax or epics is next level down. The next level down talks about what specific actions the user is taking to achieve each of those three buckets. So for bucket one, which is I want to make a loan application, the action they take or the activity they carry out is they will enter their customer and loan application details. Customer and loan application details. That is the key activity they will take under that first bucket. Once they've been able to complete that, they now move on to bucket two, which is I want a decision on my loan application. Next, they would then receive a loan application decision. They would accept the loan. They would provide that additional information, and they will rejoin the loan application journey. Next, once they've done that, we now go to the next bucket, which is what happens after the decision, which is I want more information about my account. And this information about my account could be in receiving comms. When we say receiving comms, receiving communications. They want to be able to self-service that loan account. That is, they want to be able to log into the app, log into the website, and self-service instead of calling customer services. They want to be able to manage their account. So carry out ad hoc activities or support other functions that they want to carry out. And lastly, servicing. Now that servicing has to do with all things that we need to do to provide additional value to the customer that are not directly linked to the loan application journey. Any questions thus far before I carry on? Okay, hopefully it's coming across quite clear.
Sorry, there is a question, and I've asked Timothy to unmute himself. Apologies for that.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I want to ask if we could get this video at the end of this class.
Yeah, the video will be provided. So if you're a member of the Ladder Back Down community, the link will be posted there. It will also be posted on the Ladder Back Down's YouTube channel. So if you're subscribed to that, and if you registered by email for this workshop, then you'll definitely receive a copy of the video. But thank you for that question. Okay, Becky, you've also got a question. Could you kindly unmute yourself? Thank you.
Sorry, what software are you using to do this mapping, please?
Miro, M-I-R-O, Miro.
Thank you.
So yes, good point, Becky. So let me put some caveats to that. So what I use is Miro. Miro is fantastic for when you have multiple people. So you know that scenario I told you before where we had 4 teams. We had over 60 people on the Miro board, all collaborating real time, right? Now, everybody was inputting onto the board and building out the user story map. So it's fantastic for that. However, if you don't have that, I've also in the past used Visio to create one like this. I've also used physical stick post-it notes if you have a physical environment where you have everybody in and you can all stand around a board and use Post-it notes. You can also use Excel to create this if you want, but the best one for it, for that real-time interactive collaboration, is Miro. Okay, cool. So next you have the user stories. The user stories are all the bits in yellow. Oh, Joanna wants a question. Joanna?
Hi, sorry. I was trying to speak since, but I couldn't unmute myself, so I had to put a note there on the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, this is great. I was just thinking, because a lot of time in an agile environment, a lot of people work on Jira, and I was really looking forward to see you, use the app on Jira and connect this to the releases so that people on the call, they can see it practical, how you do the actual mapping live without, a whiteboard like this. Is there any chance of doing something like that live so everyone can see from scratch how you did the mapping?
All right, from scratch. Okay. Okay.
I mean, a few examples, we could go online, maybe on a website. You've talked about bank, pick one of the personas from the bank and then go on the chat and they can see. So I think the thing, because it's not just in doing the story mapping in isolation, we can tie that to a release and people can understand why the story mapping and then connect that to releases. Then, all the puzzles fit together.
Okay, so good point you've made, Joanna. So, however, understand that this is in phases. So the bit you're talking about connecting to Jira is like a second phase. This phase is building out that picture first, where we've not written out the stories in Jira, or we've written some, we've not written everything. And we're building out that initial picture first, which will go on to connect to Jira. So for this phase, all I'm trying to get everyone to understand is, how do I build a user story map in the first instance? How does it tie into the releases I'm going to do, or how is it going to be delivered? And then once you've gotten that understanding, it becomes more of an admin exercise for you to then say, okay, I've got this user story here that says send OTP. I go onto Jira, I create a user story for it, and I link it up. It becomes more of an admin exercise. But where most people fail in the first instance is being able to build out this picture and have that completely thought out end-to-end view of saying, I start from here, I end here, and these are the things that we need to build as a team for us to be able to achieve the key outcomes we want to achieve. So I'll see if we can do a walk. Sorry?
Oh, no, sorry, go on. I was going to say something, but please finish. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll see if we can do a walk example later on, depending on how we're doing for time, but go on, Nwolokoh.
Thank you so much for that. And I was also going to say, and I didn't actually realize that Mr. Yinko Aino is also on this workshop. He's one of our senior mentors within the Ladder Back Down workshop, and within the Ladder Back Down community, rather the WhatsApp community. And he's actually created a questionnaire of the sort of things that we would like to, learn going forward for BAs, Scrum Masters, product owners, product managers, etc. So if you are a member of the community, please don't forget to fill in that questionnaire. And I can see that he's actually just responded to a question here. So I can see that, although I'm not a BA, so I don't have a clue of what, anything that you're talking about here tonight. So I'm not in a position to answer, but I can see that he responded to something there. So please, if you're a member of the community, remember there is that questionnaire here so that we can actually bring you things like what Joanna has just requested there, which I don't have any idea about anyway. Okay, and Ikenna has a question too, and then we may want to take a break because we've gone past the hour. So let me ask Ikenna to unmute, please. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks so much. Really appreciate it. Okay, so my question would be in the context of a customer app that have different user journeys. I'm trying to think of it in relation to this whiteboard now. Each of the user journeys have its own board, or is there any way you can possibly present all different user journeys in a single board?
Ideally, if you want to be efficient and clean, you would have individual boards. So I'll give you an example. So we talked about there may be features that overlap between different personas, but when you have them on one board, you run the risk of confusion. So what I would always advocate is for you to have different boards for each persona type. And then that way you can see clearly what you're doing for each persona type.
Okay, just to follow up on this, would you build a board based on different persona type, or would you build a board based on different customer journey, different journeys?
It all depends on your specific use case. Either of them would work. You can use persona types, you can use customer journey. It all depends on your specific use case, but either of them would work, depending on the scenario you have. All right. Okay. You said you wanted us to take a break. Maybe we should finish this one, and then and then that would be a good place for us to take a break. Okay. Cool.
Yes, please. You're leading this, but I just realized that, and we've gone past the hour, and you may want a cup of water or something. You may be parched, but if you're not, then you're happy to continue until you let us know when you want us to stop.
Great. Let's just keep with the flow. We'll carry on. Okay, so we've got user stories, which is your next level down. Now, each of these is fairly high level. Now, the reason why it's fairly high level is just because these are for illustration purposes. Why do I say this? Because you've got that locate loan application page. That locate loan application page would be different for the mobile version. It could be different for the web application version. It could be different for the native app version. And so it may be that we need to create multiple user stories out of that for us to be able to fulfill that specific function. And so the way we build this out is for each of your epics at the top, you break them down into user stories. And those user stories will contain the level of detail or information that you need for your teams to be able to build this out, and for everyone to have a common understanding of how we go about fulfilling the key outcomes that the user is trying to achieve on the epic line. So if we go to receive loan, for example, we've got retrieve third-party information. In this instance here, what we're saying is, as a bank, when we receive that loan application, we're going to retrieve third-party information because we want to know who this customer is. We want to be able to recover maybe the address history. Maybe we want to confirm the identity. Maybe we want to confirm whether they are on the lists. Maybe they call them politically exposed persons list. So we do all those third-party information checks that we do. They could also be KYC verification. And then lastly, we make the loan decision. All of this is not as detailed as it should be, but these are all illustrative. Next, we'll go to the accept loan. When the customer accepts, so once they've received that loan decision, now that loan decision could be three outcomes. It could be yes, it could be no, or it could be a referral. Let's assume in this instance, they've accepted, it's been a yes, they now accept the loan. Once they've accepted the loan, all the things need to be built out. We need to set up the direct debit payments. We need to create a loan account because we don't create a loan account until they've accepted it. So we then create a loan account. And then next we need to confirm the bank details. So they've provided us with direct debit information. we now need to confirm that those details are indeed correct and they are owned by that person. And then lastly, we talked about declined loan requests. So it may be that this decline, when the customer is declined, there are also follow-on activities that need to happen. Next, we've got to provide additional info. Provide additional info is simply saying where the customer has been referred, where we're saying, oh, we're not quite sure about this decision yet. We would like some more information from you. And that's where we request them. They will then provide that additional info. And on the back of that, we could either approve the loan or we could refer. Obviously, we talked about the referral. And this is where we talked about sending additional info. This sending additional info is a one-liner here. However, it could be multiple user stories. Why? Sending that additional info could be done by various means. There could be a physical means of sending that in. There could be a digital means of sending that in. How would that happen? We need to build out the functionality to support that. And then we talk about rejoining the loan application journey. So we're saying the customer has now been referred, which means that at that point in time, we were unable to make a decision. And we're now saying, okay, give us an extra 2-3 days, give us additional information. Maybe we want your bank statement, maybe we want your pay slip, maybe we want some more information from you. Once you've provided that, we now need to reconnect you back to the loan journey. That is, if we accept you. If you've provided us with that information, we're now saying, okay, yes, we're happy. We now need to rejoin the loan application journey back, which was obviously discontinued about 2 or 3 days ago because we requested more information from you. Now, that will need us to manually review this loan application, which means we now need to create a queue to manage that workload. We now need to create the ability for some agent or some person within our business to log into that queue, retrieve that application, and manually review it. We now need to build some application process in place so that they're able to approve it or decline it. And then we also need to create the ability for them to then trigger a response back to the customer to say, we're happy now, we're now happy. Can you join the application journey again? So we send them what is called an OTP, which is a one-time password. Now, that is something that everyone is familiar with. And then next, we then need to, when they receive that, we use that to confirm their identity, and we allow them to continue their loan application journey. So they rejoin it back. So if you look at the way we've been flowing with the customers' activities, guiding us from left to right. So it's literally a step-by-step process where we are going and what happens next, and what happens next, and what happens next, and what happens next. And that way we are able to cover the entire journey. So far, we've been able to cover when they make an application. We've been able to cover when they receive the decision. We've been able to cover what happens when they accept the loan application. We've been able to provide additional information upon request. And we've also been able to reconnect them back to the journey after we discontinued them from the journey because we were looking to get more information or do some more manual review of the application, which was a different journey from people who would normally go straight because they've been accepted or simply a straightaway decline, which is all well and good. So we've gotten to the point now where we've basically catered for every single thing they need to do to up to the point where they've made a decision and accepted it. And next is the receival of communications, because once the loan has been accepted or declined, we need to send out some form of communications. Now that communication will be an email communication in the first instance, and then we'll also send out physical loan documents which will arrive in the post as a follow-up activity. Now, those email comms, when those email comms goes out, we need to be able to make sure that the communications are compliant, it has the right level of information, it has the right level of detail, which is where our colleagues from compliance and legal will come in. And once we've done that, that's been pushed out, we then also need to send out direct debit communications. So we need to, by law, provide them with direct debit confirmation, information. And then lastly, we also want to be able to send them monthly statements to tell them, what the status of the loan is. Next, we've got the self-service loan account. So the self-service loan account is where we have a self-service portal or ability for the customer to self-service. So I want to know what my transaction history is. I want to know how much is left on my loan. I want to know how much I've paid thus far. I want to know when my next payment is due. All those information, they want to be able to self-service it. So we want to create the ability for them to log into that account. We want to create the ability for them to view the transaction history. We want to create the ability for them to be able to amend the direct debit payment. And we also want to create the ability for them to make an ad hoc payment. So maybe they say, okay, I don't want to be paying £100 every month. I just want to make the final payment and close off this payment once and for all. And next, we've got manage account. So manage account is really about making changes to their account. So when we say amend customer info, we're talking about being able to amend things like, obviously they wouldn't be able to amend their date of birth because things like that wouldn't change, but things like their address, maybe their employment history, their whatever details they want to amend, they should be able to log in and manage those changes themselves. They also want to be able to export their transaction history or whatever information in a PDF form. And they want to be able to manage deposits in and out of the account as well. Lastly, we talk about servicing. When we get to the point where the user is servicing, where we are servicing the user, we're talking really about things that enable us to support the user without being directly influenced or triggered by the user. So what am I talking about? So things like this. So we've got first third-party notification. So when you make that first loan application, obviously the credit reference agencies is one example of a third party that will be notified. And then as you make your regular payments, again, there would be scheduled updates that will be sent out to them as well. That is what we'll be doing there. And then audit reporting. So we want to have the ability for us to be able to audit, the way we are managing the loans and the way we're supporting them. And then trend analysis. We want to be able to make sure that the trends when we do data analysis, so this will be your data scientists, your data teams, they'll typically be pulling this data on either an ad hoc or a regular cadence to be able to do analysis of how not just this particular customer's loan, but all the customers' loans are doing relative to, a particular cohort or another cohort. So they would do all of those analysis, and that would help to improve the services that we provide ultimately to the customers. And then a monthly statement creation. So this send monthly statements that we send here, it needs to be created. So there will be a process for us to generate that on a monthly basis, and then it depends on the choice that the customer has chosen. If the customer has requested for physical copies, then it'll have to go out, and if they've requested for online only copies, we'll send them an online version. There'll also be need for us to make sure that all the comms that we send are accessible to people with disabilities. So that, again, is something that we would also need to cater for, and we'll need to break down the user stories again to reflect that. So, which is why I kept explaining that most of what you have here, it's kept fairly high level just to enable us to understand the broad strokes of what the messaging we're seeking to communicate. Cool. So when we've done that, this would now enable us. So now we've done that, we will now be able to understand which of these items would be in release 1, release 2, release 3. Because working in an agile environment, we're going to be doing releases depending on our sprint cycle. If we are doing 2-week release cycles, 3-week release cycles, that would determine what our release cycles are. And those release cycles would be driven by us understanding what the prioritization order is. And that prioritization order would be driven by understanding our business goals, our business needs, user needs, and lastly, technical dependencies. We'll put all of that into consideration when we prioritize, because that prioritization process is another process on its own. But for what we need to understand today, once we have this view, we can start walking through the releases. But it's not just something that is done in silo by the business analyst or the product owner. It is something that is done in a collaborative manner. So you'd have, the product owner would obviously have final say of determining ultimately what he or she wants to do and in what order. But he would do that with the input from all the stakeholders to make sure that he has the best possible outcomes possible for everyone. Okay. Any questions? I'm not seeing the board. I thought I was seeing the questions. Let's see. Yeah. Any questions before we carry on? Oh, Ini has a raised hand.
Yep. There's a question here. Is there a maximum number of the personas created, or have you answered that question?
No, I haven't. So there is no maximum number of personas created. Again, that will be dependent on your specific situation or example. So depending on what type of user personas you've got, what type of customer journeys you've got, you would determine how many you want to do, but there's no maximum number. But obviously you don't want to do too many where you then, where you're losing that collective focus. See some other hands are raised as well.
Okay, so this is Ini asking a question. So if working with a UR person that is creating this journey map, and I'm not sure of what their approach is, yet I'm going to be at the receiving end of this to deduce information from it, how do I work with that? How do I go about it?
Okay, very good question. So they typically should not be creating designs in isolation. So your UI UX person should be working with you to create those designs. Because the question then I would ask is, on what requirements are those creating those designs for? They can't just create requirement designs in isolation. Requirement designs are created to meet business requirements. And so it is a collaborative approach between the UI person and the business analyst to jointly agree and come up. Obviously, ultimately, the doing of the actual UI designs is dependent, is the responsibility of the UI person, but they're doing it with input from the business analyst.
If it's a discovery session, I'm sorry.
Yeah, go on.
So it's a discovery, the project is at the discovery phase.
Mm-hmm.
They
So
claim
at this stage, they're just doing prototypes.
they're trying to understand what the user's journey, really. They're trying to understand users' perspective and journey.
Okay, let me get some more context around this. Is it that it's a brand new product where we've not had any user go through that journey before, or I'm not sure why they're trying to understand.
They want to embark on a transformation project, and they're trying to unify different business units so that the overarching business can have transparency into what's going on around.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So the goals here then, I always go back to what are my users seeking to achieve? It's all well and good, the digital transformation, but at the end of it are actual users. Now, what are those users? We start from that premise. What are those users seeking to achieve? What outcomes are they seeking to drive? What are those pain points we're looking to fix by this digital transformation? And that's where you start your questioning from. Once you've got those questions answered, you can now start saying, okay, what are the things I now need to build to enable, to unlock those key outcomes for my users?
Thank you.
So if those questions have not been answered yet, then since you're still in the discovery phase, it's a good time to start answering those questions.
Thank you. Got that. Thank you.
Thank you. And if you'd like to raise that question within the community again, and if you're in the Ladder Back Down community, please raise that question in group 3A or group 3B, whichever of those groups you're in. And I'm going to post the link to the community in a moment here. But if anyone has any further questions, so that we can allow Louis to get through the slides. Once Motunrayo has asked her question, we'd appreciate if you could just reserve those questions and raise them in the Ladder Back Down community for everyone to answer. Okay, Motunrayo, could you kindly unmute yourself, please, if you can? Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Liz, once again. It has been a fantastic presentation. So my question is almost like the last question, because right inside me, I'm not a financial person. I know that this more is like in a financial domain. But if I found myself in this kind of situation, I know that the epics, definitely I might get the higher level requirement from probably the sponsor. But how do I know the user stories? Knowing fully well I am not conversant with the financial processes, how things are being done. So my question is, am I going to be the only, if I find myself in this kind of situation, am I going to be the only one cracking my head to fixing all these things as in this user journey, or it's going to be in collaboration with the experts?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
Good.
Question.
Okay. Good question again. So when I was going through the previous slide where I was talking about the activities that you take in creating a user story map, I said you first of all gather the requirements, and that will be your normal gathering requirements process. So to come up with all this requires you to gather the requirements to say, okay, I would engage with the stakeholders, the SME on loan application process for new bank customer. I will engage with the SME for, what's the other example the other person gave, for council people applying for their first council house, right? So there is a process, a requirements gathering process, which requires the BA to use their requirements gathering skills to gather the requirements that enables them to at least create a draft, which other stakeholders can now impute into. You're not just going to call people together and say, hey, I'm helpless, and just give them a blank sheet to start putting in stuff for you. You would at least have done the initial groundwork to put together an initial draft of your understanding. And then you would then work collaboratively with your stakeholders to help you to complete this. So it's never going to be an isolated single job done by the BA. That would never be the case. It would always be a collaborative effort with a diverse group of stakeholders, depending on whoever is required to help you to build this out. But the first draft the first starting point will be done by the BA after they've done their requirements gathering exercise that enables them to build our first draft out. So it's a huge job. It's a huge undertaking. It looks simple, but what I always say to my students is it's hard to make things simple. For you to get to this point where you're able to document it like this, you've done a lot of work. All right. Any other questions before we carry on? I'm just checking for time. All right. So I'm done with this presentation for the actual practical side of things. If we have questions here now, we can take them. Otherwise, I want to switch back to my other slides. I'll check the chat. Yeah, correct. Thanks, Ikena. That's right. Identify your SMEs and reach out. Yes. So I knew this was going to be a challenge. So I'll explain something. There's a way you solve for it. So I've got an answer for this. Again, these are practical tips and tools and suggestions I'm offering, having been a practitioner. So there is the textbook way, and there's the actual way that works in the field. Okay. So I'll give you tips for that as well. All right. So if there are no questions on this one, I would put this away and move back to my slides. All right. So Q&A effectively is where we are now. I think we've taken most of the questions, but if there are any more questions, we can take them now. I've left 20 minutes for this. Okay, so it looks like I've done a good.
I think Motorayo's got another question, and what I'll do now is I'll allow everyone to unmute because I think there are still some questions in the chat window that may not have been answered. So I'll just allow everyone to unmute themselves, but Motorayo's first. Thank you.
Thank you, Nwolokoh. And thank you for the presentation, quite clear. My question is mapping this user story. So I just want to ask more like an advice. So if you have like a user interface that kind of link from one page to another, though some of the things on a particular user phase might still be call out on the next page of the interface, what would you advise the breaking down of the tickets to be? Are you still going to repeat the tickets for each interface, each slide, or one slide once it covers a particular requirement on that interface, that should be enough?
So when you say slide, are you saying a PowerPoint slide or sorry?
When I say slide, it means so why the UX is designing the interface, they have different pages. So if a journey was to go to yes, or if a journey was to go to no,
correct.
But so if a journey was to go to yes, there are still some of the things that is on the primary page still flow into the page that's that answers yes. Does that make sense? So say for if you've got on the first slide, you've got name, details, or are you able to submit this form? Are you not able to submit this form? Is this customer allowed to submit this form? And then it goes on to the next one, which kind of still, answer some display those first questions, but with different things.
Okay, so
somebody.
I think someone needs to mute themselves. Okay, yeah. So, but Raya, I think I got your question now. So what it is this: always understand that for each page, there are key outcomes that the user is seeking to achieve. Never lose sight of the user. Always abstract out your your technical or lower level specifics. Each page, what is the user trying to get? So let me give you a classic example. Going back to that example I gave you about the loan. In that page, we talked about there's two pages. There's a loan page, loan application page, and there's the customer application page. Those two pages have overlaps because one is talking about the customer's profile and the other one is talking specifically about the loan application in itself. You can decide to make that two user stories. One user story is for the loan application page. One user story is for the customer profile page, right? Because what we're trying to achieve is two different things. Now, there may be shared overlap, but you can handle those lower level details in the user story itself. Remember, this user story map is not replacing the place of the user story itself on a tool like Jira, for example. We're still going to break down those user stories with the right level of detail in the user story. But for